Welcome to Love of One Healing and Transformation, the podcast where we get real, raw, and maybe a little woo-woo as we explore the pathways back to love, peace, and your true self. I'm your host, Angie Bolton, a former corporate workaholic, that's right, turned spiritual seeker with a knack for finding balance between the practical and the mystical. This is your sacred space to heal, transform, and remember the love of one that lives within you. Let's get cozy, get curious, and most importantly, let's heal. Now let's dive in. I love astrology. To me, the astrology is the blueprint of the soul in this incarnate. Laura, tell me if I'm wrong, but that's how I see it in all of my work. Um, and boy, it is like a fortune teller. And it was once explained to me in a plant medicine journey that um, they were like, we have to explain things in human form sometimes to make sense. And what they used, my guys, was when you buy like an appliance and it comes with a user manual, and anytime you want to change something out or something's broken, you need it fixed, you just pull that manual out to see in what direction to get it working again. Well, that's astrology to us. It's our manual. And so I brought on Miss Laura Black. She's from Eugene, Oregon. She is all things astrology, but she's more than that too. She's also a yoga instructor, huge yogi. And I'll let her kind of fill you in on more about Laura because she's an amazing human and a beautiful soul. And I'm so happy that you're here today with us to talk about all things astrology, which is so fascinating to me. And we're going to talk about how it really does help us heal, how it makes us think through our life, and also reflect. It's a huge reflecting point. And also, Laura, love to dive in a little bit too today about how astrology helps us with the art of surrendering. Because I feel like in my journey, surrendering is one of the hardest things to move through. And astrology I found is a huge tool to help me surrender. So with that, thank you. And let us know a little bit more about the awe-inspiring Laura.
Awe-inspiring. Thanks so much. I'm so happy to be here. Thank you so much.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I agree with you 100%. Astrology is the blueprint of our soul.
Mm-hmm.
It is, I love the user's manual kind of analogy. That's so perfect. Yeah, I feel the same way. And really the art of surrender, you hit the nail on the head. I think astrology, one of the main uses, we think of it as like, oh, this tool of prediction, like you mentioned, oh, it's like a fortune, you know?
Yeah.
You
Yeah.
get that a lot. You'll get, I used to have a little astrology booth at like an open air market where I
That's
live
fun.
locally. And I'd get parents walking by with their kids and kids going, "What's astrology?" Reading my sign. And the parents would often say something like, "Oh, you get your fortune told." And, there's
What was
that.
your call? Yeah.
And it is a tool of prediction, but I think astrology as a tool of prediction kind of sucks the fun out of life because,
Yeah.
it's all the surprise away. But
Yeah.
what I think the higher uses of it is that it's a yoga. It's a way of creating union between self and self, or all aspects of the self.
That's a
And there are
great way
some
to put it.
high practices. Yeah. There are some very high practices where when you use astrology, one of the first things you have to kind of encounter is your own reactions to the things that you think you're seeing in the chart or that you're being told are in the chart. So it's an observer's tool, and it's a tool of awareness and acceptance first and foremost, I believe. And
Yeah.
then it can become a tool of problem solving. But then ultimately, I think surrender is the highest use of astrology, really.
Yeah. Yeah. Um, point point taken, surrender, and we can just dive in. I mean, we don't have to follow a flow today because with all of these healing modalities take us down these different paths and back and forth, but they all seem to circle back around at the end. So, um, but for the art of surrender, so I've been having different sessions with Laura for like 2 years now, I think. And I was looking back at some older clips in preparation for this day with you. And and in one of them it said, Angie, it looks like your biggest lesson here in life is to surrender to letting go of control, letting people receiving. Like I'm a really bad receiver. I'm getting better. But it was about letting people give like money and knowledge and help and then you said, and I bet those are the things that you hate the most. I was like, yes, absolutely. And then the following year, guess what happened? It all happened. I was forced, and everything went really bad, ugly, and dark for me. And I was forced to learn those lessons. And so when I reflected back on it, this is why I also think astrology is a big reflector. When I reflected back on that, I was like, holy shit. Um, but when I heard those words during my session from you through my chart, I went into this expectation mode of how I thought everything would happen. And that's where the surrender piece comes in. I had to surrender to letting it flow the way it needed to flow from the way that I, as a soul, set it up before I even came here. And I wasn't. That's the surrender I'm talking about with astrology.
Oh yeah.
Letting go of the anticipation and the expectation of how that's going to occur, right?
Yeah. Oh my God.
Yeah.
Yes. a
Yeah.
hundred all the way.
Oh my gosh. So bonkers. So, Laura, do you see this a lot with your clients? Kind of similar aha moments of, oh my gosh, you were right all along with my chart reading. And it
Yeah,
got,
I never expect that. It's really funny because we were just talking before we started this recording about how I am always wrong when I read my own chart and I try to figure out what's going to happen. So we need a mirror, we need somebody else. It's like, you can't therapize yourself. You need somebody
oh,
outside of you.
it's too hard. Yeah.
And so when I read for other people, there's always this, I deal with a good amount of insecurity in this lifetime. There's one of my big themes of work. And so
Oh,
I'm always thinking, I don't know why I'm saying this. I must be wrong. I'm sure this isn't really, I'm grasping at straws here. But people come back to me all the time and we're like, oh, everything you said. Oh, okay.
full circle. Yeah.
Sure.
Every single time. Every time. That's why it's important to share this information because a lot of people think it's just some woo-woo, oh, astrology. I've actually had some people say, people I dated, which I no longer date, not because that was the reason, but it did probably play a little bit of role in that. But like, oh, people ask me what sign I am, like that has anything to do with anything and how we're gonna click. And actually it does, but it's much, much more than that. Can you fill us in, especially for those who do feel that way still, about the
It's
deeper levels of astrology and things that we should really consider when we start thinking deeper than, hey baby, what's your sign?
yeah, and there's a place for hey baby, what's your sign, right? And it's
Yeah,
fun.
yeah.
And no shame to anybody out there who thinks of
Yeah.
astrology on that star sign kind of level or poo-poos it or thinks it's,
Mhm.
silly or weird. Of course they do. There has been a huge, centuries of push to kind of hide and reduce access to this thing. It's been so shamed and made so cryptic. It's actually very simple
Mm.
and accessible. And yes, it is so much more vast than just sun sign, although there was a time and a place where the sun sign astrology was kind of all we had, or that's what we think. The exact history of astrology and where it came from is a little bit unclear.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah.
any
Like
different
everything.
theories
Yeah.
on that, right? But yeah, we have it's based on the laws of Hermeticism, as above, so below, as without, so within. So the idea is that everything that's out there dancing in this solar system with this planet is related, is quantumly entangled. I'm going to say those words as if I have any idea what they mean.
No, you're spot on. Yeah.
With life happening here on this planet. And there is some kind of reflector process. The astrology doesn't control us, but it is suggesting or kind of mirroring, reflecting what's happening down here on this planet. Another way of
That's
looking at it as a reflector. So it is vast. We
vibrational,
have a
right?
moon. Say that again.
That's part of the quantum entanglement is the vibration and frequencies of those planets that are hitting this planet and our own auras of frequency and vibration. Yes.
Absolutely, absolutely. Um,
Mm-hmm.
yeah, we have, a sun and a moon and a rising sign is where the eastern horizon line was on this planet from your time and place of birth. And everything that's out there you have, in here or in your chart. And the idea as an astrologer is to get these planets to talk to us a little more clearly, is to know the language of the gods or the language of the stars or planets, and to learn to listen and communicate in that language as a translator and interpreter for others.
I love that. Yeah. Wow. So when people are starting to think beyond just the normal astrology that we've been so programmed to believe in, and going into the deeper levels, what are some of the first things that they should consider looking at to give themselves a little bit more in-depth knowledge of who they are and that manual of themselves, right? So
Yeah,
what are the key points that they should look at in their chart when they first get started?
I
Because
love
there's
this.
so much, it's hard to
Yeah,
pinpoint.
it can be so overwhelming.
Totally.
In
Yeah.
my introductory readings, the first time somebody sits down with me, I have a very clear structure of things that I want to cover. I always talk about what we call the personal planets, which is anything
Mm,
closer to the sun than Saturn and Jupiter. So we're talking
mm,
sun, moon, and rising sign, the eastern horizon line of your birth, and Mercury, Mars, and Venus. And then I like to
mm.
focus on Saturn, the planet Saturn, and the north and south nodes of the moon. And these Saturn and the nodes of the moon are, in my opinion, some of the most important pieces for understanding a soul's journey on this planet. And
Yeah.
Gemini that I am with a big appetite for information, I mean, it's all important, all of it. But if you're trying to go somewhere and you're not sure where to start, go with the basics of your personal planets: Sun, Moon, Rising, Mercury, Mars, Venus, and then focus in on Saturn and the nodes to figure out how to make your life work well. That's what I would say.
Mm. The nodes. Can you explain the nodes? There's a north and a south, and like everything in this planet is polarity. So that's a good place to start with definition of the north and south nodes because they really tell us a lot about ourselves in this lifetime.
Huge. And this is where we get a little extra woo in the astrologer. You know, a
Mhm.
really woo astrologer will tell you, ah, the nodes of the moon, yes, they are portals through time. They're wormholes through space. And there is something kind of eerie about them that does seem to be verified like that. The north and
Yeah.
south nodes of the moon, every planet has nodes. These lunar nodes are mathematical points in space along the orbit of the moon, where
Yeah.
it happens to intersect between the Earth and the sun, or on the other side. This is where the eclipses happen. So
Uh-huh.
it's the mathematical calculation of where the eclipses would have happened at your birth if you were born under an eclipse. You know, it's like that's those are the places where if the sun and moon were there, that would have been an eclipse. Um,
Mhm.
these are portals for your soul through lifetimes. The South Node in particular, the tail of the dragon, Ketu, is
Mm.
said to be a space that holds a strong vibration that was present in many of your recent lifetimes. And you can say that you were steeped in that energy in your childhood because you picked up where you left off, whereas this game seems to go.
Ah,
The North Node is said to be the head of the dragon, and Rahu is what we call it. And this is a place that is like a soul's calling. It's something that it's a code that describes something internalized in us that we need to bring forth and externalize and express loudly. It's our dharma. I like
yeah,
to simplify it and
karma.
say your South Node is karma and your North Node is dharma. So
That's good.
points about who you've been and who you're being called to be in this lifetime. Does that make sense?
Oh, totally makes sense. And you're absolutely right. In all my work for the book and for this podcast and just in general, they constantly talk about your dharma and then also in past life. So you do pick up where you left off. So if you left off not knowing your lessons, then and learning your lessons, then you pick right back up learning the same lessons until you learn them. And if you don't, then you just keep circling around at that karma. Whereas if you do learn your lessons, then now all of a sudden you pick back up where you left off and you continue your path forward for soul growth. So makes total sense to me. Yeah, I mean,
Cool.
hello, manual.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah,
It's a really great teacher's reference for, Earth School. It's wonderful. It's a
yeah,
uh,
yeah. And Earth School is the biggest part of school.
yeah, quite the graduate level for soul evolution here.
Yeah,
Um,
100%. Oh my gosh. When people talk about the sun and the moon and those rising signs, are there any key indicators they should look at to help them figure out and navigate like what they should be in life or does that determine their personality or where do
yeah.
they find that out too?
I want to be mindful of using phrasing like this dictates their personality because I think that's where
Yeah,
people start to get a little like, "Ugh, don't tell
you.
me who I am or what to do, you know? And
Yeah.
many people, that's really important that we're not using astrology to tell you to prescribe and this is who you are, this is who you're going to be. Because a chart, an astrological chart is so vast, so full of potential that they say it would take the native, dozens of lifetimes, if not thousands, to fulfill all of the potential in any single chart. But the soul is the free agent that shines through and determines how they're going to light up that chart, how they're going to use it. This is why we see, I love twin studies in astrology because twins are
Oh,
so very different, even born, 1 minute apart. Like it looks like the same chart. How come they're so different? Well, the soul
yeah.
is free. They choose how they
The soul
express.
is its own thing. Yeah.
So it's delicate to talk about it like that, but I would say to answer your question more directly, for the sun and the moon, if somebody's just getting started, it's like, what do you need to know? We're looking at the sign that these planets are in. Planets, we call the sun and moon planets in astrology.
Oh, no, yeah.
We look at the house that it's in, which the houses are just different areas of our lives that are also correlated with these 12 signs of the Western zodiac. And then you want to look at any aspects being made. And that can be a little bit of a farther step, slightly, I don't want to call it an advanced step, but if you get overwhelmed, just back up and look at the signs and the houses. And if
Mhm.
anybody's interested out there, there's a really great, I mean, there are many great starters kits or reference books. But I think the most recent one that like really locks you in on the sun, moon, and rising pretty well and aspects made to them is Channy Nicholas. You were born for this. That's such a
Oh,
great
yeah,
book.
Jenny. She's great. Yeah. 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 I follow her. She's also a really good speaker, so I like listening to her. She's all personality. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
When you talked about the signs, let's dive into those a little bit more because there are 12 signs, there's 12 houses. Each house represents its own kind of subject, if you will, right? Within your life. And both polarity too. So each house, right, has a positive and a negative aspect to it. Can you just you don't have to dive in totally deep because we'd be here all day, but can you just kind of touch base on what each house kind of just represents from a high level
Sure.
perspective?
I can give a really broad generalization if we just kind of bounce through them. And this is fun because this is the sort of the story of each of our lives. In some
Yeah.
sense, we're all going through who was it that wrote the hero's journey. So
Mhm.
this is the from house 1 to house 12, or from the first sign to the last, Aries to Pisces. Um, Aries is the baby screaming as it comes out of the birth canal. And this is kind of the essence of the first house. This is you coming into the world. Your first breath is your ascendant. You're born. Your first house indicates energies that were present in your early development that become a part of your character development. The house of Aries, Aries says, I am. So that first house is, who am I? The second house goes to Taurus, and this is the toddler. We start to take all that Aries energy, the fire, the chi, and we learn to move it through our first physical tool, which is this body. And
Uh-huh.
we do, and we learn what to value. We learn, this is mine, give me that, that kind of thing.
It's very
Oh,
Taurisy.
yeah. That's the
I'm a
house of
Taurus, so yes, it's very much so.
Hmm. And then we move into the house of Gemini. This is I'm a Gemini. Listen to how much I'm talking. This is where we learn things and we learn to learn and we connect. We learn conversation and we get interested and curious and we learn to change. So that is the house of, learning and siblings and extended family and the mind. It's all these influences upon you in
Mm.
your mental development that we're not parents, but we're immediate influences. Your school teachers, your neighborhood, things
Oh
like that.
yes. Yeah,
That's
okay.
development. We go into the fourth house. This is Cancer. That's the archetype of the mother. It's a water sign. We're talking about home and family. And the house of Cancer is said to be the house of the mother in most traditions. This is the place of nurturing and watering. If you look at a chart, a circular chart, the house of Cancer is right at the bottom. It's your roots. And we could look at that multiple ways. It's how you were watered and nurtured by your family. It's also your lineage and heritage. We move from the fourth house to the fifth, Leo, a fire sign, extreme
Love
passion,
Leo. Yeah.
play.
We're very
Me too.
passionate. Yeah. We're very passionate people.
So, and this is the house of creativity, which starts with the inner child finding its passions and talents, noticing what it loves that lights it up inside and where it would want to be in the spotlight. And then that
Mhm.
becomes sexual energy. So this is the house of puberty and crushes and dating and romance. And then it becomes the house of
A
sex
mess.
and exploration. Yeah.
It's a messy house.
Uh, and then comes kids, your children, house. We move to the sixth, and this is the last house of childhood. And this is the house of Virgo. This is where we learn about the expectations that are going to be set upon us by society. We learn about service and sacrifice and hard work. We learn about health and wellness. We learn to get our ducks in a row and have a daily routine and be very organized and systematic. And we're being prepared for the world. And then
Hmm.
we move into the second half of the zodiac, which begins in adulthood with Libra, the house of Libra, the seventh house. And this is where we make our first contracts and agreements with the other. Partnerships, relationships, clients, collaborations, putting things together. Libra is famously the sign of the scales. It's about bringing
Yeah,
two elements or beings together in harmony.
balance. Mm.
Exactly.
Hmm.
We move from those first contracts in the house of Libra to the eighth house, where those contracts either deepen or I would say dissolve or are severed, but it's usually a little more extreme or intense than that. House of loss,
Hmm.
pain, or the house of shared resources and intimacy. I'm an eighth house sun. This is where I live. This is why I do the deep dark. Let's dive into your resources on the other side of the veil. Let's get occult geeky, you know?
Let's get to it.
Mhm. Psychology and deep, dark, twisty, interesting things where we dive for
It's
the
an
truth.
interesting house for sure.
Yeah, it's my
Yeah.
favorite. I'm biased. I live there. It's the
Yeah.
house.
We're about to get to my bias house, so it's okay.
Yes, that's like the grand finale, right? 12th house. So the ninth house, or rounding the corner toward the end here, is the house of Sagittarius. And after the deep dive and going to the darkest places in human experience, that's the eighth house. It's the phoenix rising from the ashes after that death and rebirth of the eighth. And now it's Sagittarius, and it's where we want to rise up and go out and explore the world, explore our
Yeah.
philosophy, the house of God.
Mhm.
I don't know what
Mhm.
God is, but apparently it's in that house. And
That is
that has,
what you want it to be.
oh, yeah, I like that. So we find our inspiration in that house. We go to college, we travel the world, we tell the truth. We go to court and fight for justice. Ninth house. Then we come around to the 10th house of Capricorn. And this is very much at the top of the chart. This is the result, speaking of polarity, of the way we were watered in our fourth house of Cancer. And this is what we produce in the public eye as a result of kind of our nurturing. The 10th house
Mhm.
of Capricorn is about legacy. That would be if I had to pick one word.
Career, do you think that sits in the 10th house? Yeah.
Career, goals, public image, and your reputation. Very
Mm-hmm.
much what you're building in this world. Legacy is my word for it. We move on to the 11th house, house of Aquarius, second to last. And Aquarius is, I know it sounds like a water sign. It's an air sign. It's the
No,
water
people do
bearer.
get confused. I'm glad you brought that up. It is true,
Yeah.
but they think, oh, no, it's a different flow.
Yes. Yes. He's bringing the water as in irrigation. It's engineering, it's problem
Growing
solving.
things for you. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. It's a humanitarian. So this the House of Aquarius is first of all about everybody. It's about the collective of humanity. Aquarius being an air sign, all the air signs are about social connection and information. And Aquarius
Yeah.
is the highest information. It's the last air sign. So it's very much about the high sciences, invention, and the future.
Mm,
It's a
future.
place that's said to be about the people we surround ourselves with by choice. Social
Mm.
clubs, teams, organizations, things like that.
Oh,
And
I love that.
leads us, so we're in this big group of people in the 11th house, but that leads us on into your
I
your grand finale house, the 12th house. There,
Just for people to be clear, I have about well, some things are called planets and some are not. Like Lilith, sometimes are called planets and some are not. But for me, if you want to call the things that sit in my chart planet, there's like eight. And
yeah,
very heavy in the 12th house. Yeah.
yes, that's what we call a stellium in astrology. The
Yes.
stronghold of planets in one sign or house. You definitely are a 12th houser. Which is not an easy feat to be a 12th house. It can be magic, it can be heaven, it can be hell. It's a tricky one to talk about. The house of
Mhm.
Pisces. It is classically, traditionally, Hellenistically called the house of your own undoing. So we can look at that as in for better or worse. The examples I always use are, well, I'm feeling stressed, so I'm gonna go sit down and meditate. I'm gonna undo myself. Or, I'm gonna do a bunch of heroin and undo my life. I'm gonna have an affair and undo my marriage.
Clarity. Yes.
Uh-huh. I'm going to go to a monastery and become a monk and undo my ego life. It's the place of isolation away from
Yeah,
the rest of society. It's a place of aloneness and a place of connecting in beyond the veil to the unseen realm. Pisces rules things like altered states of consciousness. So you find people in the 12th house who, what the right use of the 12th house, what I want to say is that it must either be very spiritual in nature or creative or
yeah,
both.
yeah,
And if a person is not using that 12th house, taking time alone to be in connection with, I don't know, whatever's unseen magic in this world, then it turns into hell very quickly. And it can be the
yeah.
things that take us to prison or that break our lives down, so to speak.
Yeah. I can speak a little bit on the 12th house because I'm in it. Maybe I'm in it everywhere. I got
Yeah.
my sun, my moon, my Jupiter, my,
Yeah.
my Venus, my
Mercury speaks
my
to us.
Chiron, my Mercury, yeah,
Yeah.
and my Black Moon Lilith. And I'll have to tell you, just from my own healing experience, it's hellish. It's a lot to process. It's a lot to move through. And this what sparked this whole podcast idea of modalities because for those that don't know yet on other previous episodes, but or the history behind Love of One podcast is that each modality that is being highlighted in each episode is something that I've personally done to move through the karma, the undoing of my past life, my ancestors' past lives, my whole soul family's past lives, like all of it. I'm here to undo it, and on a collective level, undoing on a collective level as well. Mostly on the other side of the veil. So
Uh-huh. Yeah.
so much fun, and and thank you, Lord, for saying the isolation part because there's a lot of people who have 12th house heaviness in their chart and many times their friends and family is speaking from personal experience and those that I know that have 12th houses is that a lot of them don't understand that when you don't see me or them for a while it's not personal, it's we need to isolate ourselves to move through it because it is painful and it's hard work and it wipes us out and
Mhm.
it has us rethinking our whole self and why we're here. And it also has us reflecting and working really, really hard, going right back to surrendering.
Yeah. Yes. That 12th house especially. No wonder that's such a key for you because that is the epitome of, and I'm thinking of your North Node in Scorpio, which is also like, hey, your dharma is to surrender. That is a house of dissolving, the 12th house, surrender. I mean, we're all going to get a big taste of this over the next year,
For all
which
of us.
we should segue into the transits portion
Let's
also.
do it. Let's do it. Let's segue in. It's a perfect time to switch into it. So, talk about that. Talk about what's happening and what's about to happen and what it looks like for you from
Oh
an
man.
astrology perspective. Yeah.
Well, if you're newer to astrology, if you've been listening to astrologers at all in the last, I'd say 5 years, you might be getting the idea that, like, those astrologers, they're always just so dramatic and, fear mongers or something. They're always saying, oh, it's crazy out there.
Big woo woos.
And it's true. Astrologers lately, I feel like a broken record when I'm just like, it's a wild one today, guys, or this season had
Hold
its
on
own.
to your pants. Yeah.
But there's a reason for that. It's not always like this. There are definitely cycles and seasons of calm, and we are not in one of those. We are in some of the
Yeah.
craziest times in history. I mean, nobody needs an astrologer to tell them that, right?
I
Uh,
think turn on their TV or their social media, they can see it for themselves. We're just perhaps confirming.
right. Yeah, this next year, one of the reasons that astrologers are getting so worked up about the years 2025 and 2026 is because this is kind of a critical mass moment for humanity. One of my astrologers has been saying, I've looked back 13,000 years in the astrology, spent the time, and 2,000 years forward, and he's never seen anything
Medication.
like what's coming for this next year. It's pretty wild. And that is because all of the outer planets that are kind of generational markers, these are the planets that are the markers of the beginnings and ends of eras.
Yeah.
Pluto, Neptune, and Uranus, these planets are all, which are the ones that we cannot see with the naked eye. So they have a
Ah,
strange pull on us, this invisible tug that, and it takes each of these planets like anywhere from a decade to 3 decades to move
No.
through a single sign. So they're huge chapter markers. For example, Pluto went into Capricorn in 2008.
Mhm.
2008 was, in the United States, the year of the recession beginning and the housing market crash.
Yeah.
Capricorn rules the economy and the housing market and literal buildings and structures. So that just ended on November 19th. We've been through that whole journey. And now we're in the age of Pluto and Aquarius, the age of
Yeah.
AI, the dark side of technology and power to the people and all
Yeah.
kinds of interesting things.
Yeah.
Each of those three outer planets going into a new sign is a big deal. And they're all doing it within like a year of each other, which is insane, unheard of. So it's the ends and beginnings of many eras this year. And one of the big transits we're going to be experiencing together is that the nodes of the moon, which we just talked about, right? The north node is this
Yeah.
soul calling, and we have it in our birth chart, and then we have where the current lunar north node is in the heavens, which has been in the sign of Aries since June, July of 2023.
Ooh.
The north node in Aries, me, and the south node in Libra, we in our relationship. There's been a huge amount of review around our contracts and relationships. It was like the year of breakups.
Well,
Address
yeah.
conflict. Yeah, a
Yeah.
lot
On all
about
levels. On all levels. Yeah.
so much. Um, Very important over the last year and a half or so to get really in touch with ourselves, to put ourselves first. It was a year of selfishness in the best way, like self-growth, personal alignment, so that the relationships and contracts involved in your life are really aligned with your true self. No more camouflaging, chameleoning, or bending yourself out of shape to people please or modify.
I saw
So,
that a lot, just in general. Yeah. So, yes, spot
yeah,
on.
those nodes, it's where the eclipses happen. And so around, if you pay attention at all to the eclipses, which you can't deny. I don't know anybody, even people who don't believe in astrology, when they get hit with an eclipse, they're like, what is happening?
Powerful energy. Yeah.
Eclipses force things to shift and move forward, chapter markers in our lives. And the eclipses are about to shift from the Aries Libra axis, self and other, into Pisces, North Node going into Pisces, and South Node into Virgo. Health and wellness, um, precision and artistry, uh, preparation, and surrender is the big one. North Node and surrender, North Node and surrender. North
Right.
Node in Pisces is a huge trust fall path.
Yeah.
So the next year and a half, starting on January 19th or 29th, we
Almost
are all
there.
here for quite a journey for a year and a half of like, how do I let go of control? How do I stop worrying? How do I expect positive outcomes? How do I just surrender to this, you know?
It is a nine, right? And nine at the end is transformational. And you have to surrender in order to transform yourself into something greater. And so that makes sense to me on that level. On January 25th, right? Is that when all the planets line up? Is that affecting us and moving us into that 29th stage? Or
Yeah, oh
about
yeah.
that?
It's quite the lineup, really, from late January into April is like if you have placements in Pisces or Aries, maybe even like Virgo, you're gonna have some stuff come up. There is a beautiful planetary alignment stacking up just late January, and then the North Node tips over into Pisces. And it's more magical than just, ooh, the North Node in Pisces, which happens once every 19 years. This time, because of the planetary lineup, Neptune and the North Node are aligned. And, this only happens once every, I think it's like 15 years. And it's a really special situation where Neptune, which is the ruler of Pisces, and the higher octave of Venus. So if you're familiar with Venus, the goddess of love and beauty and abundance and creativity and desire
Venus
and
rules my house. I love
yeah,
it.
our ruler. Yeah, she is, well, Neptune is kind of the divine level of those frequencies. Venus is the human level of creativity and love and connection. Neptune is where we open up like our crown chakra and let the divine energy flow through this vessel. If it's the difference between seeing somebody paint a nice picture or do a lovely little dance, and you're like, oh, that's beautiful. And having your jaw drop to the floor because how are they doing that? That's not even
That's amazing.
yeah,
Yes.
yeah. So
Yeah.
boom. Neptune on the
Yeah.
north node. Pisces, the sign of the artist and the mystic. There's some magic opening up. It's
It's amazing. Thank you.
Take a moment to reflect on your soul's journey. Are you ready to uncover the blueprint of your soul? Laura Black of Blacklight Astrology offers personalized readings that go beyond the stars. Her sessions provide the emotional connection and human insight needed for deep healing and transformation. With compassion and intuition, Laura helps you align with your highest potential and rediscover the love within yourself. Book your session today at www.black-light-astrology.com and uncover the blueprint of your soul. For additional information on how to contact Laura, see the description and her bio with this episode.
Okay, so we talked about this amazing planetary alignments and what that means to us collectively. Can you talk a little bit about trines? People talk about trines, triangles, and squares, and when you pull your own chart up and you look in the bottom of it, wherever what software you're using, I use the same software as you. So, and then you see this little like chart at the bottom, and it has like these squares, these triangles. What do those mean? Just on a high level.
Yeah, so kind of the building blocks of astrology is you learn the 12 signs, you learn the
Yeah.
planets associated with each of the signs, you learn the houses, and then you learn the aspects. And this is kind of the last main
Yes.
building block that allows you to play the game of astrology and put it all together. The aspects are relationships between these inner parts of you. If anybody out there has ever heard of internal family systems theory, IFS, aka parts work. This is a type of therapy where we're investigating these many different parts and pieces within us that have
Okay.
these choices and behaviors in our lives. Um, Astrology, I like to joke, is parts work with glyphs, with a map. And those aspects, those little the trines, the sextiles, the conjunctions, all that stuff,
Yeah.
those little symbols and words, those are talking about how, your moon placement in your chart relates to your Mercury if there's a relationship there. And some of those aspects create conflicts, but they
Mhm.
force growth because that conflict comes up and you have to address it. And some create
Full
ease.
growth.
Yeah. So if we put it too simply, this is far too simple, but if you look at your chart, it's not always universal, the color of the lines that they use, but for the most part, you'll see blue lines for trines and sextiles. And these are considered the harmonious or like positive aspects. And then you can look at for red lines that might indicate squares, 90 degrees, for oppositions, 180. And those are hard aspects that are, challenging or difficult, but they force you to grow.
Yeah.
So these
Well,
can indicate
good they use red because people do see red on their chart and they're like, oh my gosh,
what's
this.
that? Yeah. I get that a lot where we'll pop up a chart that has a lot of these red lines. They'll be like, oh, what's all that scary? I'm like, oh, well, you're going to grow. Yeah, so the blue
Oh,
lines indicate ease, but in these
okay.
inner conversation, which is not always a good thing. A lot of us go down, is that good or is that bad? Well, it's not that simple.
Yeah.
It's what you make of it. And a trine can be the easiest flow of energy between two inner parts of you. But what is flowing? A trine to the south node, which is our karma, and kind of
Yeah.
some of the bad habits that hold us back or our biggest shadows. If you got a trine from your south node to your Venus, well, that's flowing some of your karmic energy right into your relationship and core values sector, so it's not always like great.
Yeah. Well, the first thing that comes to my psychic mind when you said that is soul contracts.
Yes, yeah. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Yeah. So just to point out and spotlight that, yeah, it can go much deeper if you dive into um, those
Infinite.
lines and those trines and those colors on your chart. And that, yeah, it's just impossible to talk about today. So definitely book a session with Laura to figure that out on your own chart, because they are important. And they do kind of lead you down this path. So talking about all these things, now we went through, the houses and the north and the south nodes and the aspects and stuff. Do you want to cover just a little bit about like the other things that aren't necessarily planets per se from a lot of people, like perhaps like asteroids or other big moons or something else that big stars that that kind of have key triggers on them for people just so they kind of have a broad understanding of what that might represent.
Absolutely. Yeah, I mean, there's so much. And some people shy away from astrology because you start to peek your head behind the curtain and you go, ooh, sun, moon, rising, versus Adlet, Lilith, what's it do to the note? What? It's so much.
Rabbit hole so much,
Uh,
yeah.
yeah. Yeah.
I spent days, even with my oldest daughter, like 3 days in a row, just rabbit holing. And by the time we're like, we got to stop, we got to put it away, we got to stop.
Yes. Oh my gosh, I definitely went on a little manic journey when I first started studying. It was just days and days and days.
Imagine.
So after you get the basic planets, Sun, Moon, Rising, Mercury, Mars, Venus, Saturn, the North and South node, you get, Jupiter, Uranus, Neptune, Pluto. Then you start getting into the finer details. And, every astrologer has their own set of opinions or ideas on how to work with any of these, or whether or not you should work with any of these extra, extraneous kind of little placements. But we're looking at things like Black Moon Lilith, of which there are 4 different Liliths. There's the asteroid, there's the apogee of the moon, there's the true calculation of her, there's the mean, the average calculation of her, there's another little star, there's all kinds.
She doesn't
Um,
back down, I tell you what.
gotta love Lilith, respect.
I do so much.
There are things like fixed stars, and this is a little section of astrology that still baffles me. This is where you run into a lot of astrologers who might be kind of into the flat earth theory, because how else are there fixed stars in the sky? How come they never
Oh,
move in
right.
the place, And I don't have an answer to these things. I don't know if it's very literal, like the star Regulus at 29 degrees of Leo, famously Donald Trump's rising sign.
Oh,
Is,
my.
yeah, that picture from the attempted assassination with the bullet and the blood
Yeah.
and him on, like that
True.
is as Mars
Spot
and Leo
on.
29 degrees as it gets.
Spot on. Every
Um,
astrologer was talking about that actually that
oh
day.
yeah. So there's things like the fixed stars, of which there are many, and then you can get into the finer points. Like if I'm doing a relationship reading and somebody comes to me and they want to talk compatibility, there are at least a dozen little, you know, astral bodies, asteroids, minor bodies, mathematical points. The Arabic people have a huge amount of what we call the lots, these mathematical equations of like, this is the lot of having a
Oh,
female child, and this is the lot of, the part of fortune is probably the most common one people know about, your
I
fame and
like the
fortune.
part of fortune. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, you have a
Yeah.
really prominent part of fortune, right? It's in that
It's
stone.
hitting right now, I think. So can we
Oh,
talk about that just a little bit? The part of fortune. And I also then want to go into midhaven because I think those 2 points are really important. And
agree.
even if just a high perspective of where does it sit in their chart,
Mm.
they could start with that, right?
Yeah, I like
So
that high perspective too, because it's the top of the chart.
yeah, it's
Midhaven.
always at the top of the chart. So I was like, 10th house like area,
Uh-huh.
yeah.
That's exactly
So
it.
yeah.
Yeah,
So,
Midhaven is the middle of heaven, the Emom, no, not the Emom Cheli. The wow, I'm blanking on the MC. Medium Cheli. The midhaven is this point that would be associated with high noon at the top of your
yeah.
chart. Think of
Okay, that
the
makes sense.
rising sign, and I've said like that's where the eastern horizon line was. If you were born right at sunrise, that's where it would have been, that constellation.
Mm.
And so that's where that was, and that kind of glues down where the rest of the chart falls. So the midhaven would be where high noon would have been on that day, or you could think of it as like in the full light of day in the public eye. How are you seen in this world? And the midhaven will have a great deal to do with your legacy, your career. It's that 10th house, and it's associated with Saturn, one of the most important planets of all.
And what about the part of fortune?
Yeah, part of fortune. It is this mathematical point that is said to be what the native would experience or what they would feel is like fame and fortune, but without any of like the what we know as the dark side of fame and fortune. It's not
Yeah.
always actual fame and fortune, but it is a point of where you can achieve. And it's a little blip. It's like a little lucky spot.
Yeah. It's a lucky spot. I like that. I love that. Yeah. Um, when we talked about midhaven, in career and how they want to be seen, is there any other aspects of their chart that help them reveal what that midhaven is pointing at?
I mean, so many, and this is where a professional astrologer comes into play. There are many
Perfect.
great references, basic level. Like if you wanted to just look at the midhaven and understand it, a great book for that would be The Astrology of Success by Jan Spiller. Anything by Jan Spiller. She's a genius. But she has
Good to
a great
know.
deal about the Mercury. Yeah, she just pares it down to just that. But as an astrologer, as a professional, if somebody were coming to me, I would be looking at all of their earth houses, the second, the sixth, and the 10th. I'd be looking at the 11th. I'd be looking at the fourth house because of how they were nurtured and what they need in order to produce in the 10th. I would be
Yeah.
looking at the ruler of the 10th house. I'd be looking at Saturn and any aspects to it. There's so many
Oh
layers.
gosh. Yeah.
Yeah.
I say call Laura. That's what I do. Yeah.
For a professional
That's what I
astrologer,
do. In
so
fact, every time I go to a plant medicine ceremony, mine are being so many in my 12th house, mine are like, oh. And
yeah,
then I come back as a human and integrate and think that wasn't right. That doesn't make any sense. That's not real. So then I book with Laura and I use her as a fact checker. It sounds funny, but because again, the manual, right? So I even have her go in forward in time, which I don't know that people understand. Sometimes people think what's happening to my life now, not what happened in the past to help me figure out where I'm at today, what is coming to me in the future, and not just I even had her go all the way to 2050 because, well, on a personal level, I don't care. I feel like that's when I'm leaving this earth. And I wanted to see if there's any markers for that. And there were. There was like, well, that's what I was told from ayahuasca, so that makes sense. So, so I also use it as a fact checker for that. It has been very powerful. And but these are things that you can't just do on your own, or you would, I mean, you can't figure this stuff out on your own, and you can't use AI for that either. And I kind of want to ask you about AI versus a human astrologer because, it is coming out with apps, and I've tested it myself, but my point of view is I miss the personal aspect of diving deep into the really knowing how they really work from a personal standpoint. And so for me, the astrologer will never be out of the loop. What's your take on that?
yeah,
Being
I
an
agree 100% because astrology is a soulful and it's a tool of
perfect.
reflection and awareness and evolution for a conscious soul.
Mm,
AI
beautiful.
is a great tool and I've been utilizing it quite a bit and testing it to see like what can this do.
Yeah,
It falls extremely short and I don't think it will ever be a good replacement for a professional astrology because it lacks
I agree.
soul. It does not
Like
understand.
soul and emotions, right? And the whole point of this planet, and everyone will find out eventually what my soul's purpose is from a soul perspective.
Mhm.
Um, but emotion drives this planet, and you're not going to get that emotion from AI. And so when we talk about these healing modalities and we're seeking help, we're always seeking from an emotional standpoint. We're not seeking from computer standpoint.
Right.
We're speaking
Yeah.
from emotional because the only way we're going to heal is to tackle these emotions within. And the only way we can do that is to connect on an emotional level with a healer or a guide or an astrologer or any of these things to really help us dive into what we need to release and surrender to, right? To heal ourselves, back to loving ourselves, really.
Exactly. Yeah.
On that point, how do you see astrology helping people get back to the love of themselves, loving themselves again?
Oh, well, to answer that, I would want to share a little piece of my story if that's okay.
Absolutely. Please do.
Kind of taps into how I became an astrologer, which I always like to joke, I didn't choose the astrology life chose me. That is
Not true, probably.
100% true. Um, so I was raised in a cult, and I'm actually on the verge of coming out with and speak about it pretty soon and start to share my story publicly.
Great.
And being raised in a cult, I went through some pretty awful abuse as a child from members of that cult, sexual child abuse, and then extreme shame for just natural results of having been abused like that.
Sure.
Exploring my body, things of that nature, and then just a really toxic load of shame all my life being raised in that cult, to the degree where by 5 years old I blocked out the memories of what had been happening to me as a toddler. And so I grew in a cult that is a breeding ground for narcissism and became quite a toxic, people-pleasing, narcissistic nightmare. And
Yeah.
but in my childhood, I was exposed to astrology, and it was the first time I had ever felt seen or understood to any degree. And it was just a sun sign, like, oh, you're a Gemini, you're not crazy, you're just crazy. And I was like, oh, and I was like, I get it. Somebody knows me when I didn't know myself, because when you're raised in a cult, you are trained to be disembodied and
Oh,
disconnected.
programmed. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So I developed into a very, I had a deeply wounded core and developed into somebody who was extremely separated from myself. But I have in my chart something called a finger of God. Again, I don't pretend to know what
Oh,
God
that's
is.
good. We haven't touched on that. Yeah.
Yeah, something is happening here, and this finger of God is pinning me down. It's the only time that I really feel comfortable saying somebody's life is full of absolute fate that they promised would be fulfilled before they were born. They have no choice. You're on a very short, tight leash with the universe. And oh, I felt that. And when my finger of God, I have two of them. When one of them got activated, I was exposed to astrology. And there are all these little markers in my life when these fingers of God would kind of get stimulated, activated, where I'd get shoved closer and closer to my astrological path. Meanwhile,
Hmm.
it was being I was being mocked and made fun of by everybody, including my dad, about being interested, shamed, that's a tool of the devil, that kind of thing. So I just kind of secretly studied it on the side.
Hmm.
And then I became such a little navel gazer, so self-obsessed. I heard that a lot, like, oh, use astrology, you guys are just so interested in your own selves, or it's so much ego. Yeah, that was true for me. It was a tool of self-obsession for a long time. It's just a tool, like
Of
anything else. A knife can cut or
course.
it can kill.
Yeah.
Um, we always say like Hitler was an astrologer. You can use it for terrible things.
Yeah.
And
That's true.
my path just kind of took me to a point where it was like, look, this is the only way your life is going to go down. My life closed in on me. I found myself in a really one day when the planet Uranus entered the sign of Taurus in 2018. I started to realize that the tool of astrology that I'd been studying for years without mentors and a teacher, and so I was doing it badly. The
Mhm. Yep.
tool could help me accept things. I was so desperately looking for how I was special. Tell me
Uh-huh.
I'm special. Tell me I'm beautiful. Tell me I'm
Yeah.
good. And then I found out that I was probably the worst collection of darkness and dark things that I could ever. And I was just in
Yeah.
denial about my shadows.
Yeah.
So some things happened in my life, and astrology came in and showed me the actual appropriate use of it, and through working with plant medicines such as ayahuasca, which has been one of my greatest teachers,
Yeah.
and
She's a beautiful
with
teacher.
Mhm. We're working with amazing astrology teachers as well. I'm very blessed in that front. That astrology took me so far into navel gazing that my own head came out of my own ass, and I woke up
In one or the other.
and learned
Perfect.
learned how I could use this to be of service. And it became a tool of self-connection. And that is my greatest work. If you speak astrology out there, you'll know what I mean when I say I have Saturn in the final degrees of Libra, conjunct Pluto on my ascendant in my first house. And that is very much somebody whose work is to heal their relationship with themselves and then help other people do the same. So I became a yogi, an astro yogi, and now I try to be of service to others.
I love that. And I think we have a little time to dive into the most important planet of Saturn. Do you want to talk about that? She's a beautiful planet. She's also very highlighted in my chart as well of collective service,
Yeah.
clearly. So, do you want to just talk to people about why she's so beautiful?
Yeah, I love that you call her she. You don't hear
I
that a lot.
do. I always call her she.
She
Yeah.
is a she in many rights. We call her she because she is the ruler of Capricorn. Capricorn is an earth sign. And actually, I kind of want to tell you one of my favorite
You.
ayahuasca journeys
Oh,
because
yeah.
she taught me
I will talk
about
about ayahuasca all the time. Look at me. I'm like getting all excited. I'm in my
it.
chair. Oh, yeah. Yeah, sure.
Tell me. So I went into a ceremony, you and I, we've both been working with plant ceremony or plant medicine for a while. And this one journey, I was asking, how I could be of service. And I didn't see myself as an astrologer at this point. I mean, I was obsessed with it, but I didn't see myself as like a professional. I didn't
Oh,
think that
got you.
was
Yeah,
going.
yeah,
This
yeah.
is years ago. And she said to me, you can go read people's charts. That's how you can be of service. And I was like, yeah, but nobody cares. Everybody hates astrology. I was having like friends ditch me and boyfriends
Yeah.
break up with me
I
because
mean,
you
I get it.
love
Yeah.
astrology, you know. Um, and then we hit a critical mass kind of moment in that ceremony, and I was like, yeah, but like, how? I don't, people hate it. It's dumb. And she goes, well, it won't be that way forever. And she took me out into the multiverse. She showed me
She's
that
good.
every planet out there that has conscious beings on it, this is, I was tripping balls, guys. I don't know how true this is, but I hold it with a grain of salt. But I like this idea that every planet out there that has conscious life on it has
Okay.
an astrological system that is a tool of awakening for any conscious beings on that planet. And one of the best things that a native on any planet can do is to find the planet in the solar system, dancing with their conscious being planet, that rules the most dominant energy on their home planet and bow to that entity.
I
Well,
love
here
that.
we are on planet Earth, which honestly could almost just as easily be called planet water. But planet Earth. So it's said that if you come to this planet with a lot of earth or water in your chart, that life is a little easier. You know what it is to be human, Miss Taurus in the 12th house. That there is a natural sense of grounding. Of the earth signs associated with planet Earth, we have Taurus, we
Thank
have
you.
Virgo, and then we have Capricorn. Capricorn is the most evolved earth sign and the most powerful. We call it one of the cardinal signs. It's a leader, an
Yeah.
initiator.
Either.
So here we are on planet Earth, and we bow to the planet out there that rules the most dominant energy here in the highest way, and that is Saturn, ruler of Capricorn. So big bad voodoo daddy in the sky is Saturn. That old devil
Or
is
mother.
there.
Yeah.
Yeah. He's about, well, Capricorn codes, she is about longevity. They're about
Yeah.
legacy. It's about building something over time. It's very like Rome wasn't built in a day, you know? So what's your personal Rome? So Saturn, if we look to Saturn in our chart, will talk to us about the things that we need to put effort into, even if we see no results for decades, because that is my favorite way of talking about Saturn is that is our tuition for Earth school.
Yeah.
You owe this planet that if you want to have
Perfect.
a life experience.
Tuition for Earth School. I love that. And then when I hear you say that, I'm like looking at my chart and I'm like, yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
that makes sense.
Oh, Saturn.
Yeah, oh, Saturn and all her goodness.
Notoriously difficult. This is why we're kind of chuckling. It's like, oh, Saturn causes delays and limitations, and it's about burden and responsibility and maturity. Like, oh, okay, grow up, says Saturn, you know.
Not cool to be a Taurus with their Saturn. It's very challenging. This is when people
Yeah.
are like, "Yeah, I just keep going. I just keep going and going, and then then I disappear for a little while, and I just keep going and disappear, and that's one of the reasons why I love having like 5 to 10 things going all at once because because of Saturn, it takes a long time for it to mature. I plant
Yeah.
seeds that take a long time to grow.
Yes, that slow growth Taurus code. I'm so with you on that. Yeah. Ah, patience.
That's okay. It always works out in the end. And with that, it does always work out in the end. And as we surrender to it, allow it to flow into us, and trust in the process, and trust that whatever our manual guide, aka astrology, is telling us is exactly what we put in place before we came here. So if you're curious about what you put in place to come to this Earth school, look at your astrology chart. It's what you put in place for yourself to learn soul growth, which is ultimately what we're here to do, is grow our soul to its most highest form of consciousness state possible. And the only way we can graduate from this school is to learn all the lessons we put in place, which you can find in your astrology chart. So,
Hmm.
Laura, how can people get a hold of you to dive deeper with personality, high extreme knowledge, and emotions?
Well, you can find me on Instagram. I'll be producing a lot of astrological content there. I am at black_light_astrology. And you could go to my website, www.black- little hyphen astrology or black-light-astrology.com. And that is where you can
Perfect.
book with me.
Awesome. Thank you. All of her information, her bio, her contact information, websites, social handles will all be in the description of this episode as well. So, Laura, thank you. Thank you for your bravery with your stories today. Thank you for all your amazing knowledge. And thank you for helping me on my own journey to healing. Because, boy, it's been a long one, and I still have a long ways to go. So, I'll be booking a session soon, girl. Thank you so much. And, love and light to you today and every day. Thank you so much.
Thank you, love. Thanks for having me. Appreciate
Of
it.
course. Of course. It's a
Well,
wrap.
that's a wrap on today's episode of Love of One,
And time is
Healing
out.
and
So that's
Transformation.
perfect.
Thank you for
Yay!
being here, for showing up for yourself, and for
Thank you. That was
remembering
really
the love
fun.
and
That was
peace
super
that is
fun. I have
already within
goosebumps
you.
all over.
If
That
you
was
enjoyed today's conversation,
so fun,
hit
and we
that follow
covered every
button, share it
aspect,
with
full
your soul
circle of
fam,
astrology we
or leave a
could.
review.
And
Seriously, it's
yeah,
like
it
a
was
big
beautiful.
spiritual hug.
Thank you.
Until next
That was
time,
awesome.
remember,
Thanks for having me.
the journey to
Oh, of
yourself
course.
is the
Yeah.
journey home.
And I'll
You've
let
got
you
this.
know
I'll see you
before
next
it
week,
drops.
same
And then if we
time,
need anything
same
else,
place.
and then if you want to send me some like personal pictures of you or video or anything that we could slap onto the episode at the beginning or the end or whatever, that would be great too.
Cool. Okay. I'll do that.
Okay. Yeah.
Thank you.
All right.
Thanks.
Thank
Great
you,
to
my friends.